Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, developing your skills, your network, your habits, and more. I'm your host, Aaron Hayslip, and today we're going to be talking to Lisa Shissler Smith, who is currently engineering manager at Netflix. Ultimately, Lisa is a self-taught developer with a variety of experience leading software teams, hiring developers, and leading at organizations such as Girl Develop It and Women Who Code. As you'll hear in this interview, Lisa has a passion for retention, especially for those from unrepresented groups, and she does this by ensuring that everyone can have a sense of belonging in tech at companies like Netflix. Additionally, as you'll hear in a moment, Lisa is a big fan and advocate of programs like Parsity. Now, word of warning here, our audio had a little bit of a mishap. There was a power outage, so my audio may not be as clear as desired, but Lisa more than makes up for it. So let's get started. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. As we were just talking, you've been on a lot of podcasts recently. And I talked about maybe that's because of Netflix, but it's also because you're amazing. You've always been a giving person. I think you've been on a lot of panels for Code School that I used to be part of Project Shift. And you're always a blessing there when it came to mentoring or speaking on panels. So I know you have a lot of experience. That being said, probably what everyone wants to know about and talk about is Netflix, right? That's like the hot topic is like, how can I work at a FANG company? And almost before you even got the sentence out of my mouth, you were like, we're only hiring really senior people, which I figured is true, right?
I know.
But before we get there, I'd love to know about your journey from how'd you get started? Because I'm pretty sure you don't have a computer science degree, or that wasn't your original thing.
I do not, no.
Now you're an engineering manager at Netflix. So I know it's been, that's not a short journey, but hear about it a little bit.
It's not. I have probably the non-linearist of non-linear career paths. And I consider that, and I think you've heard me say this before, but I consider that a feature, not a bug. I think that all of the things that you can bring from jobs, even if it's, I never want to do that again, is really valuable. And building software needs to have a huge amount of empathy behind it. And the more empathy you can have for your users, I think the better your product's going to be. So that's the thing I screen for, but I think it comes from having a variety of experiences. And I appreciate people who are laser focused on their, I want to be this from a child. I was never that human. Yeah. I don't think I still am, honestly. And I've been doing this kind of a while. I do have an information and library science degree from North Carolina. So a kind of adjacent, but I don't have a CS degree. I don't have any formal CS training. My undergraduate degrees are English composition, library science. I was the last library science major, and they shut the program down behind me. Wow. And then I have a music education minor that has more credits than one or the other of my majors. So I did a little bit of everything. I was in college for 5 years, and between the two of us, my brother was as well. We could have graduated a whole third person with the extra credits that we both had. So I'm more of a generalist than I would say specific, which was great for librarianship because you kind of have to know just a little bit about a lot of things. And it's more about knowing how to find things than it is necessarily knowing all the things, which I think is still a really useful skill. So
I mean, that's the skill of a developer, right? How to find the
answer. That's exactly right. Exactly. And that's served me well throughout my entire career. But I taught myself how to code because as I was a librarian, pretty much everyone I met was like, really? You're a librarian, huh? So I began after a time to realize there might be a tight mismatch between human and job. And and so I taught myself how to code at a time when you could do that. I don't want to say quite easily, but fairly easily. There wasn't a lot on the internet.
Okay.
Back pre-Google, if you remember what that was.
I'm an old. Easily, so. What made it easy to?
Well, so at the time it was really HTML and it wasn't even CSS. So it was HTML.
Yeah.
Got that, hands down. And then CSS got added in later. And then I learned active server pages for my first technology. My first job, my first online job, the server that my website resided on lived in a box across the hall from my desk and in a closet, and I could go and reboot it and I had to frequently. But like active server pages was like the cutting edge. Like I could do forms and accept form input. It was so exciting.
Yeah.
So that was like my big, my big back end. And then I had a child, and I moved to a very rural area of North Carolina where technology was not at the forefront and remote work was not a thing we did. I had asked for it and was roundly rejected.
Wow. Okay.
So I went back to being a librarian in the smallest public library in the state of North Carolina, both by square footage and budget, 1,500 square feet. So it was, and it had the only 3 public computers in the that end of the county. So we provided computers on a Gates grant to help people like do job searching and basic internet research, that kind of stuff. And I was a night librarian at North Carolina Wesleyan University, which fit in with my small child. And then we moved to South Carolina, and I fixed computers for elderly retirees who mostly wanted a substitute grandchild to hang out with them. And so I did that for a while. And then I started working at a daily newspaper as an overnight news electronic news generator. I would take the PDFs that they had done for publication and cut them up into individual little JPEGs and make an online version of the newspaper. Oh my God, it was the jankiest thing ever. It was so great. And then somebody left and they were like, hey, do you want a bigger job? And so I became a community moderator and online manager, and I sold ads back when we sold impressions poorly for online ads. And then we were able to move back to North Carolina. I worked for a very terrible, failed government project. And then I was a webmaster at a hospital. And then I applied for my very first PHP job without ever having written a line of PHP professionally, which is my story about how you should apply for things that look interesting regardless of your qualification, your full qualifications. So I got to build a little app at the time.
Okay.
Very old. It was a little app that searched Twitter. So it was like an API, a PHP API integration. And you search.
We're talking Twitter now. Come on.
Right.
That's
right.
Not
it wasn't that but like you can do the same thing now. Like Twitter provides the same sort of thing. Yeah. So it was like a little interface on that you could search across tweets. And so I put a little muscle behind the design. I did some user testing with my brother and some friends. I had a little help guide, and apparently I gave it a name and a brand. And apparently I had the most complete package of anybody, and it was a lot of fun to work on. But when they were like, what's your weakness? I was like, I don't know PHP. And they taught me. So like they took a chance on me. So I had a lot of people take chances on me over the years, which is why I'm such a fan of like giving people the opportunity to learn wherever possible. Like, but right now what I need to though is to make sure that I'm setting people up for success as a manager. It's really crucial to me that everybody have the tools that they need. Yeah. And right now my team isn't structured where I can take on early career talent just yet. But I'm paving a road. That's my pathway. But yes, so I moved through a lot of different jobs. I built a lot of websites really quickly over about 8 years. I worked for agencies, and then I went to Spoonflower to work on their e-commerce. But while I was there, I had founded our local chapter of Women Who Code, and through that met the people at Spreedly. And was really impressed with their operation. Was like, hey, like if you need somebody to come sweep the floors, just call me. Like I would love to work here. And they remembered that, and apparently were like sort of low key recruiting me over a period of a couple of years. And called me up one day and were like, hey, we're interested in bringing somebody on board who has leadership experience but not management experience and turning them into a manager. Are you interested? And since I go around and talk to people about like, hey, take a chance, reach for those jobs, I couldn't really be like, oh, no, I just want to say that. I don't actually want to do it. So in lieu of being a giant hypocrite, I took a plunge and moved into management without any sort of like real idea of what it was going to be, and without any sort of understanding about whether or not I was going to be well suited for it, because no one's born to management, right? Like it's just not a skill that you like, you just don't pick it up like reading or whatever. So the proffered mentorship was perhaps less than had been ideally scoped. So I learned a lot of things trial by fire. But I learned how to work with product. I learned how to manage people. And my philosophy behind people management is make sure everyone has what they need to be their best selves while they're at work.
Yeah.
And that means also having what they need to be their best selves while they're not at work. So like making sure that they have that balance. Like first, I care about you as a human, because selfishly, if you've got stuff going on, you're not going to be working. Right. So like go and take care of the thing that we all know isn't going to happen conveniently outside of 9 to 5 hours. Like root canals happen and tires need replaced and repair persons need to come to your home. Like there's all kinds of things that happen in life that like, if you're stressed and worried about taking care of those, your focus is split. So very selfishly, I'm like, we need to take care of you first. But I did have one of my employees tell me that they told me more things than they told their therapist, which I loved the degree of trust there. I am not qualified to be anyone's therapist. So like, I don't know that that was necessarily the best thing, but I also like appreciated the fact that I was able to build that kind of rapport with someone. And then after a time and a really like stressful, most of a year project that was super high profile and really like hard regulatory deadlines, Zapier was like, hey, what's up? And I was like, yeah, no, I would love to have this phone call. So I took my stressful project and turned it into a presentation that got me my job at Zapier. And I led a global team.
Using Zapier at all? Like
I had used Zapier probably for about a year and a half, 2 years, just to do some like real low level stuff. My favorite thing to do before it became a thing in Slack was to have my Slack status update based on the meeting that I was going into.
Nice.
So tied in with my Google Calendar, and it would update my Slack status so that everybody knew where I was. Because at Spreedly, we were partially remote. We were 3 days a week remote, 2 days in the office. So it was really important to keep my status, current with what I was doing. So yeah, I had been a user of Zapier, learned how to say it early on, which was great.
Is Zapier not Zapier?
Yeah, because it makes you happier. So that's how you remember.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly.
I'm
so
glad to know I always said it the right. I've been a huge fan of Zapier for a long time. Right? Whenever you started working there, I was excited about it because I was like, oh, I love this place.
Because it's like robots to do things that like the time saving. If I can automate, if I can throw technology at a thing to make it better, I am here for that. Like my home and my life everywhere. So
I would say that a huge
deal.
part of what has enabled Parsi to be such a lower cost tuition than Project Shift is Zapier.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we were finding. Like, it started when the pandemic hit. We took kind of a hit because our primary users are small, medium businesses, which got disproportionately hit by the pandemic. But within a few months, that like, oh, heck, I can do more with less mentality settled in as we all, moved into pandemic normal. And we really like it took off. We had instituted some cost saving measures. And those were, I think it was 90 days. And we like, everything was back to regular again, which was great. But I think that's the really like the key value add for Zapier is that like you can do lots of things in a way that feels high touch to either the people who are at the other end or to whoever you're interacting with without spending a lot of time doing it. It used to be that when you picked a CRM, you had to like really carefully vet all the options and all the different things and basically settle for something that wasn't going to give you everything you wanted. And now you can pick whatever one that you like the most of and then just pad zaps around the edge to make it do everything you want to do. And it turns into a full-fledged product.
I mean, even as a developer, like there are things, that I do. I'm like, oh, I should, spin up a Node app to like do this thing. I'm like, wait, I should check first. There's probably someone who's already done it and it's a zap or something.
Exactly. And that's my first thing too. I'm like, oh, how am I going to deal with this? Ooh, I bet somebody's written a zap for that already. So like, I don't even have to be that creative about it. Just go like peruse the library and be like, I want this plus this and get this thing out of it. So at Zapier, I had a global team, which was a little, it's very interesting because there was no single hour when the whole team could meet. We were that spread out.
That's crazy.
And so team building across, literally every time zone. I had folks in Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, and Portugal, and UK, and all across every time zone. And then I sat by myself in the Eastern time zone of the US. And that was a lot. But it was a great way to build that sort of like remote work is successful because of intentionality. Like you can't just assume things are going to happen. And, I feel, I have mixed feelings about the like supposed serendipity of like us being together in the same room. Like for sure, it's great, but it's not the only way to get work done in a group setting. So the intentionality behind that is key, and really good communication. So I built those muscles strongly enough that when Netflix decided it was time to institute remote work, at least in a hybrid situation, that they needed remote leaders. And so they paged me, and I, of course, took that call. I was not prepared to move to Los Gatos. I have a very large blended family, and it would be like, lifting an entire city and trying to transport us across country. So that was never going to be in the cards for us. But this is a way for me to both be able to work for, a world-class FANG company like Netflix, but not have to leave my home here, which is great. So
I've got, there's a few things that in there that I've got questions on. Some deeper things, but before that, what so you went remote with Zapier before?
Yes, pre-pandemic.
Developers are by nature can be remote, unlike a lot of other jobs, which nowadays we learned that actually those jobs can be remote
pretty
too.
much everything. Yeah, exactly.
But you were doing it before it was cool. I know that you're doing Women Who Code in locally. You're very involved. I mean, Spreedly, Spoonflower. You were very involved in like the local ecosystem. What did that feel like, or what was that decision like to go work at a company, first Zapier, that was decentralized, and then Netflix, who's like probably the opposite of like in Durham in some ways, right on the West Coast, kind of,
yeah. So it was I gotta be honest, when I first started at Zapier, it was a little terrifying because I was like, well, our remote at Spreedly works because we have those 2 days in the office, when in reality it worked because we had the 3 days remote. Like the 2 days in the office were fun, but they turned into like high school, where basically you're like high five as you switch meeting rooms, and everybody just like, you spend your whole day in meetings because you're together. So like my rule there was, if any one human was remote, the whole meeting was going to be remote. And that served me well because it got me in that like remote meeting muscle, and everybody was on camera and everybody had the same experience. Because while it can be done, being that one person that's on the big screen and everybody else sitting in a room together does have some issues for like, crosstalk and isolation, that kind of stuff. Plus, reactions are difficult to gauge when you're like, there's like a big long table of humans that you can't see, right? You get to see it like a tiny little profile way far down distance down a tunnel. So making sure that you have some, parity between what an in-person experience would be like. But it was fairly daunting to take that on, because it wasn't, my team was the most distributed of any team at Zapier, and it remained that way from when I started all the way through. And my boss has heard me say many times, like, just because we're a global company doesn't mean that every team needs to be global necessarily. Like, there's definite advantages to having a support team that can follow the sun without yanking people out of bed at weird hours, the day and night. But it was difficult. Like, I had a very high producing front-end engineer who lived in Portugal, and her counterpart lived in Taiwan. So like when she would make a PR, it'd be 12 hours until he saw it. And then it would be 12 hours until she saw his response. And then it would be 12 hours if she asked a question. But, and so it was like, for her, she was used to this really high level of output. And it was really like, that was a difficult wrangle. So we had to re-engineer some projects so that she had a little more throughput and was able to do that. But that's pretty much like that. Those were the big challenges, like figuring out how to work together in a way that gave everybody a constant stream of work that made them feel productive without the, the pressure of it feeling like, well, here I'm going to sit for the next, like I've done all the things I can do, and I have to sit around for 12 hours until somebody answers my question. So that was a fun bit of engineering, social engineering. But yeah, it was a little, and so like, with Netflix now, honestly, like it's almost a vacation, because I have those like 3 to 4 hours in the morning where none of my team is online yet. And so I can get a really big amount of like adulting and prep work done before anybody gets online. And then my day, it doesn't go too late. Like, we have to be available between 10 and 4 Pacific for meetings. And so, I'm done at like 7 or 8, which is fine. Our kids are all big, and so nobody really needs me right now. So I have the great privilege. And honestly, that was true when we moved into pandemic. It's like, it was just the next day for me working at Zapier. I would like check in with the children, make sure everybody had enough internet to go to school, and I'll see you at 5 when we're all done with our meetings. We'll all come together. So it was. I do have a remarkable amount of privilege there. I only have to do this, and I don't have to try to manage small school-age children, which I know has been an exceptional burden during pandemic times. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my wife, she's doing her master's degree, but has been at home. We've got they're now 3, 5, and 7, but she was like lamenting like 2 weeks ago. She's like, literally, it's been, because they just are starting school, and she was like, it's been 18 months. She's like, I've been doing the same thing for 18 months.
Yes. And that fatigue is huge. Yeah. And I don't think we collectively, like as a human race, honestly, have reckoned with that in a real serious way, because the fatigue and the stress of having to be, a teacher and a project planner and a general contractor and and then doing your actual job, whatever that is, on top of everything else, feels like a lot. So I think that was one of my biggest challenges at Zapier, was like keeping up with COVID news and response on 4 continents simultaneously, because it's been that's another demonstration of how things are very different around the world, and like it moved in waves through my whole team in different impacts. And one of my engineers in Portugal, her dad was working in Paris and he got trapped in France and couldn't move, and there was there was just all kinds of things that were going on above and beyond the stress that we were all carrying here too, that I was like, I want to fix it, but I can't. I can send you a fruit basket, but that's it. So
remote management and leadership training at its best.
It was. I mean, honestly, like there's about 40 of us that got hired at Netflix that are all remote leaders in order to help usher that in. And we all have a very similar experience in terms of like either having worked fully remote before a pandemic hit, or, like really wrangling it during pandemic times. And we're here to help make that transition into hybrid and remote work, work basically.
Amazing. I want to ask about Netflix and what you're doing and some things we talked about right before we started recording. But, one of the threads that's consistent in your story and what you were talking about for others is this idea that you would, take a chance and step into something that maybe you're not qualified for, or you don't feel qualified for. And then on the other side of that, you talked about people who were willing to take a chance on you. Like, like in your story, where does that come from? Like, because that's one that's unique. None of our students, even the most qualified, most privileged students, oftentimes don't feel or do those things, right? The hard things that they have to do in order to get a job, which is probably reaching out to people who they are intimidated by, etc. What made you be able to do that sort of consistently? I guess
that is a fantastic question. I think it comes down to the fact that I'll literally talk to anybody. Like I don't want to even say like social anxiety, but like I'll strike up a conversation with anybody at any point. And I think that's really like networking, I know, gets a bad rap, right? It can be very stressful. It's this like thing. It's got a big buzz around it. It's very heavy. You get this like everybody has to network, but nobody really tells you what that is. And so I've boiled it down to like a really simple formula. You have to be where people are, and that can be virtual or physical. And then you have to talk to them. And that's pretty much it. Like, it's not like a lot of steps. So people think it's this big, like, you have to engineer that. Just go to where the people are, either virtually or in person, and strike up a conversation. Now that terrifies people, and I get it. It's not everybody has my million words for every occasion situation going on. But basically you just ask somebody a question about themselves and they'll talk. You don't even have to, you can just stand there and let it wash over you. You don't even have to like nod and smile, and you've gotten information and you've made a connection, because it's those, and it feels unfair, but it's those sort of ephemeral network connections that have really resulted in me getting all of the jobs that I've gotten since my first PHP job. Like I, threw myself into the Women Who Code network, and our real goal there is to provide that networking platform. I call it brunch. Pre-pandemic, we would do it once a month, but it's basically a safe space where people could come and hang out and connect with other humans who had, shared interests. And so it doesn't even have to be around work. You can meet people. One of my engineers met somebody who gave him a job through a long distance biking club that they were both in. So cool. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily, all professional networking all the time. Find something you're interested in to talk to the humans and ask them, because then either they know somebody. Like my hairdresser referred me an engineer the other day. So like you never know where those things are going to come from. You have to talk to people and let them know like what you're interested in, what you're looking for, and just kind of put that out there in the universe in various ways. It might be a LinkedIn post. It might be a Medium, authorship, but it might just be like, hey, I'm going to go to this meetup about Legos, and like hang out with people who share an interest. And then, they'll remember. Yeah. I remember, like I'm hiring right now, and I'm like, where did I meet these humans, and how can I bring them into my network? How can I get them into this part of this job? So we frequently, as humans, fail to recognize that we've made an impression on another human until way later, and so it's those kind of interactions that are ephemeral, hard to catalog, hard to categorize, but fairly natural when it comes down to it. You're just having a conversation with somebody, and later on they're going to be like, oh, they mentioned whatever. It's how I found the person who's going to, fix my floors and whatever. Like this is how we operate in life. It's all, and if you get a recommendation, this is the thing that I tell my team. If I get a recommendation for somebody to come join our team, hiring is alchemy on the best of days. Like you put together a bunch of stuff and you're like hoping for a really good outcome, but there's no guarantees there. But if they know somebody on my team, if they've worked together, that removes at least a pretty substantial variable in terms of like, does this human function on a team? Right. Yes. Like I have direct evidence here of somebody that I know and rely on that I can work with, that they think this person is someone reliable that they can work with. So like those kind of recommendations. So talk to your friends, talk to their parents, talk to the person who, brings you food, talk to everybody in your life and tell them things. And not everybody, again, is as open and unfiltered as I am, but it's also like a muscle that you can develop over time. You can work on that.
Yeah. And I think, not just to like say nice things about you, but I think there's something about like your attitude and approach, and I don't know this, but it feels like this is true, is that everyone has something to offer.
Absolutely.
Like you have this positive, I think if I'm honest, I can be fairly cynical. My wife, she jokes, and I don't think she's actually thinking it's that funny, but she jokes that I can act like an old man oftentimes, like that. What was it? We ordered takeout from Happy and Hale the other day.
Yeah.
And I drove to Happy and Hale, and I came back and I opened up my thing, and my rice was like hard as a rock. Oh, and I was like so mad because I just drove there. They were about to close, and I called them, and the person on the phone was like, no, I doubt your rice is hard. I just checked it. It looks good. Like, send me a picture of it. And I'm like, I'm not sending you a picture of my, but I'm like going on and on. My wife's just like, she looks at me and she's like, you're messed up. Like, it's basically.
Look, there are days when wrong rice is just the thing that's like, what? Like the whole universe is like against you. But like, I think you're right. Like, I do feel like everybody has something to offer. And I think they fail to recognize that in themselves. So like my job as a manager, I rarely, because I work at the level I work at, I'm rarely like, you did this thing totally wrong. It's more like, hey, you did this thing like really well. What if you like aimed that at this direction and tried it over here? Yeah. Like I think you would be really great. Like why don't you turn that into a talk? Or how about if you, pick up somebody to mentor and show them, because we don't value enough that mentorship relationship in the upper direction. Because when you're helping somebody and you're giving them, you're reinforcing the stuff that you already know. Yeah. It's super easy to like do the thing because you're in a groove and you know how to do it. But if you have to explain it to somebody else and they understand it, you've like leveled up to that next place. And so when I used to teach for Girl Develop It, students in my class would be like, well, what do I do next? I'm like, come TA for my next session. Because if you can come and stand over somebody's shoulder and be like, oh, you missed a semicolon right there, that's a skill that you're building troubleshooting. And it's, you know, super easy to look over somebody else's shoulder because they're in the weeds and they're like, I've done everything. And you're like, okay, well, what about this? And that changes their perspective too. So like everybody wins in those kinds of relationships. And so building those kind of relationships, building those kind of networks is really what's been, you know, like most important to me. They weren't there when I was coming up. And so trying to provide that place for people. I was always the only woman engineer wherever I worked until appallingly recently. And so like making sure that people don't feel isolated and alone is that key. It really is that sense of belonging and inclusion that really makes people stay. And we talked about this earlier, but like my passion issue that I work on is retention of women and underrepresented groups in technology. I can focus on women because that's the group I know and I'm part of. But, you know, at the 10-year mark, women tend to leave the tech profession for good at a rate twice as high as men. Wow. And it's really, and, you know, of course, everybody's like, oh, well, they went to go have children. And that is 100% false. Like it might be a small percentage of those humans, but mostly they've been relegated to roles like they're the note taker or I was office mom. You know, like there's all kinds of ways that women get undermined in the workplace. And then at that 10-year mark, they're not doing important work. And I don't mean like charitable or, you know, altruistic work. They're not doing work that's meaningful to them. They're bumping up against that promotion ceiling that they can't get past. They're relegated to tasks. They're getting, you know, weird and iffy performance evaluations that are vague and non-specific, but not positive and making them feel like they don't belong. And that retention thing really has a lot to do with belonging because while we can point at entry to the profession and we know what to do there, we can put a lot of energy behind it. We can point at our recruiting there. It's kind of sexy. We've got these numbers behind it. But then what do you do when people are in the door? If you don't support them, it's going to be a revolving door and they're going to head right back out again. And they're going to have had a terrible experience. And they're going to be like, why am I subjecting myself to this? I'm just going to, you know, get out. And it's not just women hitting a certain point in their career because other hero professions like law and medicine don't have those same kind of numbers. It's specific to tech. And so what are we doing? And that's the more internal facing. It's a little harder. Like when I go to talk to companies, they're like, what can we do? And I'm like, have you examined all of your policies and procedures? Have you looked at how you onboard people? What do you do for someone who, as part of an underrepresented group, should forget that on the main, but support them? How do you support them when they remember? Like when they experience some sort of microaggression, or if there's something going on in our global stage that is affecting them disproportionately, how do you support those people? Are you just like, oh, well, everybody's going through the same thing? When when there was a noose hanging in front of our nation's Capitol on live television, let's just say our Black and colleagues were feeling that in a different way than many of the rest of us. And how did companies respond? So like those are great questions that I've given to everybody who's seeking for jobs right now. I'm like, ask them how they handled what did they do after the murder of George Floyd and the insurrection in our nation's capital? How did they handle during pandemic times your work situation? How did they support you when things weren't going well? Because that's the true measure of a company's diversity and inclusion, is that they care about humans individually when the world is uncertain. And, you know, what kind of support do they provide? Well, you know, I had someone in a position of leadership be like, I'm just going to keep my head down and know that democracy will prevail. And I was like, that is the wrong answer, my friend. You know, like we need to talk to people. We need to find people and like reach out to them specifically and see what they need. But what happens too frequently is that women in underrepresented groups form the backbone of employee resource groups at large companies or any company. And they're expected to shoulder that burden, who are already suffering under whatever that situation is. And then they're expected to support everyone else in the company in a way that feels really like extra and not compensated for it either. So pay your ERGs, make sure that they have the resources to support them and that they are not just your, you know, what you put on paper to say, we're doing diversity.
No, that's really good. So you're encouraging folks that like, as they're interviewing, like you ask questions to potential employers about like the main situation in which this has happened. I think it's so good because I think, it's funny. You talk about like COVID theater, right? That's became a
Yep.
term where it was like, all right, you're cleaning stuff, cleaning doesn't do anything, but it keeps you out of the spotlight of someone who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And I feel like there's been a lot of this idea of actually asking people how they've handled diversity or inclusion,
Yep.
or people who don't look like them, and when their situations arise, is a way to kind of cut through the
Yes.
diversity theater, because
Yeah.
you can have great things on your website, which you should,
Yes.
but it is hard. So my question, I guess, from that is like, what does it look like in a remote environment whenever so many of the variables
Right.
you're not controlling anymore, because you're not in the room, or I guess the Zoom call, so to speak.
Well, so those are all really great points. And I think remote gives us some unique opportunities that we don't have when we're all in the room. And honestly, if you talk to anyone from an underrepresented group and ask them how their COVID experience, their work experience has been, it's going to feature a lot of, I don't have to deal with daily microaggressions like I had to while I was in the office. So like, and if you can turn your camera off and everybody's on an even playing field. So like, there are things that like employers are like, everybody has to be on camera all the time. And this and this, and it's like, relax, like give people the space to like, I have my camera facing a wall for a very specific reason, because I'm in a very big thoroughfare in our house. And so there's like puppy dogs and children and repair humans, and like everybody in the world is passing in front of me, but they're not passing behind me. That said, I love to see a puppy or a small child show up on a Zoom call. Like that makes me happy. That's this person's life. And I want them to bring their whole selves with them. So like, I think the important thing is if you are not part of an underrepresented group, educating yourself and not putting that burden back on the person who is already suffering under whatever oppressions that they have to deal with. And I think, we all have experienced the pandemic in very different ways. So asking people, what do you need? Like, what can I do for you? That's how I lead off every one-on-one. How are you? And when they say fine, I'm like, great, start again. How are you? Like, tell me what's going on. How can I support you? What's going on in your space? Like, let's not just have a recitation of what's going on at work. I can look in Jira and see what's happening. What I want to know is, how are you, human, doing in this situation? And what are the things that you need right now? Is it a day off? Great, take it. Is it like, you only want to work from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then, whatever, like structure your day. We have this great privilege now of having this environment. Lean in and take from it what you need. And I think you're right. Like everybody's website can have something shiny on it, but you need to ask questions to get past that performative D&I that everyone is doing. And they're like, we've got this taken care of. When I was interviewing at Netflix, they sent me a beautiful video about inclusion at Netflix. So I got to ask everybody throughout my interview process, hey, y'all make beautiful movies for a living. Is this fiction or a documentary? Like, where does this hew on the scale of truth? And to a person, I was given like individualized examples of how during this stressful time period, how the company had supported them in ways that were really meaningful to me. Plus also, like the head of diversity and inclusion there is not a figurehead. They've been with the company for about a decade before they were given this position. And, rightly so, because they're really good at it. But also it wasn't just, oh, let's bring somebody in and give them a title and say we've done it. Because that happens a lot too. So like there's a lot of ways. And I think, it very much like when you try to screen for a place that is inclusive, there are questions that you can ask around like, tell me about your family leave policy, regardless of what your situation is. Even if you're not in a space where you're planning on adding to your family, asking that question gives a reflection of how that situation is handled, because it's a very human aspect. It requires a lot of like time management and understanding and balancing. And also, is it applied equally? Like, is it just lady appearing people who get maternity benefits, or is it like family leave? We have a family formation suite of benefits at Netflix that includes like concierge care to handle like the life part of your life while you're meeting your new family. And it's for people who are in adoptive circumstances and surrogacy circumstances. And, so it's not just, women facing people who have given biological birth who get this benefit. It's anyone who's forming a family under any circumstance. And that is inclusion, when everybody has a benefit. And that's, I think, the thing that we fail to recognize is that inclusion isn't just oh, these people over here need something extra. It's like everybody benefits from it. When you are inclusive, then it doesn't matter what your situation is. You can take advantage of this benefit that's offered because it's offered to everyone in an equal fashion.
Well, I don't want to keep you forever, but I did want to ask about, before we get started, you mentioned something about your team at Netflix. I know from you work on an internal tool, but you said something about that you're hiring very seniors, but then you mentioned something about Netflix is working on a. Tell me about that.
So we have a whole new department that's called Emerging Talent. And we're working on setting up pathways, and it's going to be very similar to an internship program, because how we intern at a very high level, as you might imagine, but interns come in as a cohort and they have some group support as they're going through the experience. And so we're trying to model that and mimic that for early career engineers as well, and emerging talent, because there's got to be something in between internship and senior engineer. We've got to find some place in there to help people. My team doesn't have the structure to support that yet, but I'm working with the team that's setting up the emerging talent to see if we can't build a pathway to do that. Because not only do you need to have the opportunities and the work available for somebody to do that, but you need to have the support systems in place, because it's an investment. Right. We can't expect other places to grow our seniors for us and not contribute to that. So there has to be some way that we're growing people. And honestly, and this is a thing that I tell people while they're looking for jobs too, no matter how much experience you have, you're going to have to learn how we do it wherever we are anyway, right? At Netflix, we might have a different CI/CD pipeline, and we might have different, code-based rules, and we might have different security standards, whatever. You're going to have to learn how we do it. So any engineer is not going to be productive from day one, no matter where you start. So there's no point in your career where you're like, I got this, I'm just going to go in and get stuff done, because you have to figure out that new environment and how to swim in it without, and also do the job. So there's always going to be that extra overhead. And I think that the thing that I like most about boot camp grads and career switchers is that learning mindset. That's crucial, because you got to be able to pick that kind of stuff up. And people who have gone through code school have done that with a really high degree of success. Code schools have a compressed, highly engaged format that I think helps people understand the ins and outs of language acquisition, and gives them the fundamentals that they need to start to build that career. And any place that kind of lowers that barrier to entry, code can frequently seem like a giant mystery and this huge complex problem over here, but it really is just syntax and rules. And it's not anybody can learn how to code. And so anything that facilitates that for people to feel like they, it's oh, if I only knew how to do this, you can totally do it. And, it's a great way to see if it's something that interests you before you're like, I should go to a huge, long program. Is the reason I used to teach for Girl Develop It. It was before you even go to code school, what do you think of this? Come take my $75 class and hang out with me for a couple of hours and see what you think of the whole situation. So, and I know y'all have that intro class type situation too. It's a great way to get people to is this even something, everybody should learn how to code. Why? Do you even like it? Maybe,
right, exactly.
Maybe people should learn how to code. But if you want to, this is a great way to do it. And you have great, CS fundamentals and theory base too. So not every code school is flawless, but someplace that has a really good balanced curriculum, someplace that has an aspect of, job searching and career connections and networking in it as well, because it's not just learning how to code, it's all these other things too. So a complete package, I'm a huge advocate, and anybody who has the energy to do that, I kind of want them on my team. So I'm a fan.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. Last question here. If I was a graduate of a code school or someone who is thinking about getting into it, and my goal was to work at a place like Netflix, what would you suggest be kind of the next step or the strategy? What is a possible pathway to get there?
So a couple of things, like you got to get that first job, which can sometimes be a hurdle, but there are places that help ease the transition between code school and your first job, like Collab Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Those are some friends of mine from Zapier that started Collab Lab. And so that gives you the opportunity to work on another group project with like project management philosophy and agile techniques. And you have to like come up with a product design concept and work it all the way through to completion. So it's a really good exercise in, sharing a repo and making sure that you can work collaboratively with others, but it also has some career searching components. And we're just finishing our, third installment of Career Lab, where we go over LinkedIn profiles. I have a session on how to tell your story. There's prepping for the technical interview. There's mock technical and job fit interviews. So it gives you that sort of in between space. So those are great transitions. Working on open source projects, getting yourself used to working in larger environments, because you're never going to be in a, you might be in a super small environment, but working in a large environment is a great way to transition to someplace big. And just, taking every experience for what it can offer you, even if it's, I don't love doing that and I don't want to do it anymore. So like making sure that you have a variety of experiences and a variety of ways to package and sell your story. So the more experiences you can acquire, the more connections you can make. Those are all going to be, part of that journey. And also, remember, I'm old. So like I've done this for a really long time. So spending, it will take some time, but continuing to learn and staying, vibrant and vital in the community is going to help seal your path forward into bigger, better, shinier places that you want to work.
Awesome. Shinier places. That's where we all are hopefully headed, is shinier places.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time. You have been, I think, an inspiration for a lot of people in terms of carving a new type of career path. And so it's great to get some words of wisdom from you and your experiences and perspectives as well.
It was my pleasure to be here. I really enjoy speaking with you about these things that I'm passionate about.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Well, that does it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To find out more information about our online code school, visit parsity.io. That's parsity.io. We'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Develop Yourself podcast.